This isn't a video about some future civil war. It's not about what might happen someday. This is a story about the war that we're already in. A soft civil war that's been unfolding in slow motion for years, right under our noses. Not with armies in the field, but with information, political lawfare, media manipulation, and economic sabotage. I'm going to walk you through how it started, how it evolved, and how we ended up living in two Americas that barely even speak the same language anymore. I'm not just giving you opinions, I'm going to give you evidence, some real examples, real politics, and some real events. This is also part one of a 5-part series where we're going to break down how the Civil War really started, what it's going to look like as it intensifies, the mistakes people are going to make, and how to survive during the collapse, and then after the collapse, how to rebuild life after it's over. If you want to see the bigger picture and you want to survive it, stay tuned.
Look at this.
Picture America not as a battlefield of guns and cannons, but as a crumbling mansion. The floors are cracking, the walls are splitting, the ceiling groans under its own weight, and from the outside, it still looks like the same grand house. But inside, termites have eaten through the foundation, families are shouting at each other in the halls, the servants have locked the doors and picked new masters, and everyone pretends the house isn't falling down around them. But this is what America has become in the early 2020s. For decades, the elites, the politicians, the media, the bureaucrats, they all told us that America was unbreakable. The system works, they said. The courts are fair, they said. The media tells the truth, they said. Your elections are honest, they said. But you know what? 2016 shattered that illusion. In November 2016, a billionaire TV star with no political experience, Donald J. Trump, did the unthinkable. He beat the machine, he outsmarted the politicians, he outlasted the media onslaught, and they never forgave him. By January 2017, before Trump even puts his hand on the Bible, plans were being drawn up to undermine, sabotage, and ultimately remove him. Inside the Obama administration, right before leaving office, they set in motion what they called the Crossfire Hurricane investigation, led by the FBI, overseen by DOJ officials like Sally Yates and James Comey, sold to the media as an investigation into Russian interference. Everybody remembers Russia, Russia, Russia. But it wasn't about Russia. It was about building an insurance policy. In their own words, caught in text messages between FBI agents Peter Strzok and Lisa Page, they didn't just fear Trump, they feared losing control of the entire system. Anonymous leaks flooded newspapers like the Washington Post and the New York Times Daily. Intelligence agencies worked hand in glove with CNN and MSNBC. Every minor scandal was blown into a constitutional crisis. Bureaucrats inside the government, the so-called resistance, bragged about slow-walking, sabotaging, and ignoring presidential orders. This wasn't politics anymore. It was informational warfare. America's government was eating itself from within, and millions of regular Americans like you, me, farmers, welders, truck drivers, small business owners, watched in shock as the system revealed itself to be corrupt, entitled, and utterly out of touch with the American people. Just as Trump's presidency staggered into an election year, the perfect weapon arrived. The cough cough. At first, it was just fear, but quickly the virus spread and became a tool. Governors like Gavin Newsom in California and Andrew Cuomo in New York City seized emergency powers they kept long after the immediate threat had actually passed. Health bureaucrats like Dr. Anthony Fauci became de facto rulers, deciding who could work, who could worship, who could gather, and who couldn't. Congress unleashed trillions of dollars, much of it flowing not to small business owners and workers like me, but to the mega corporations and their political allies. In less than a year, 40% of small businesses closed permanently. I was one of those. Meanwhile, companies like Amazon, Apple, Facebook, they all doubled or tripled in size. The working class was sacrificed, the ruling class flourished, and while the media, like CNN, MSNBC, or NPR, told you it was just for your safety. When the dust settled, the 2020 presidential election wasn't just about who got the most votes, it was about who controlled the rules. Using COVID as the excuse, mail-in voting expanded on unprecedented scale, signature verification rules were weakened or outright ignored. Private tech money, like the $400 million that Mark Zuckerberg funneled through nonprofits like the Center for Tech and Civic Life, flooded into swing state election offices. Big tech companies openly censored negative stories about one candidate. Everybody remembers the Hunter Biden laptop. The system showed it could not be trusted. And half the country realized, maybe for the first time in their lives, that their vote didn't count the way they thought it did. By early 2021, the stage was set. America wasn't a united country anymore. It wasn't even pretending. The battle lines had been drawn, not by geography like in 1861, but by ideology, by class, by information. Are you an Android user? Are you an iPhone user? Are you woke? Are you not? Are you MAGA or are you pro-Biden? The real civil war had already begun, but almost nobody saw it yet. So picture a battlefield with no uniforms, no front lines, just millions of people armed with lawsuits, cameras, voting machines, and social media accounts. Welcome to America's soft civil war. When guns are too messy and riots are too obvious, you pick up a new weapon, the law. Starting in 2021, we watched the rise of lawfare, the use of the legal system as a political sledgehammer. Some great examples would be Donald Trump. He was indicted 4 times, and J6. Parents at school board meetings labeled domestic terrorists by Merrick Garland's Department of Justice. Conservative states, they were sued over abortion laws, voting laws, and even immigration enforcement. J6 protesters, hundreds imprisoned, many without trial, and some for nonviolent offenses. I actually know somebody that was caught up in there, and I could tell you a story. Meanwhile, Antifa rioters who burned federal courthouses, charges dropped. The message was clear. Justice is no longer blind. It's wearing a team jersey. And ordinary Americans, even if they had no love for Donald Trump, saw what was happening, because if they can do that to him, then they can do that to you. So when words stop working, fists and bullets start speaking. The summer of 2020 was just the opening act. Over 570 riots in American cities, $2 billion in property damage, and at least 25 deaths linked to the violence. It didn't just end there, though. Since 2021, assassination attempt on Supreme Court Justice Brett Kavanaugh happened in 2022. The armed man was arrested outside of his home. Multiple attacks on conservative political events, such as firebombings, assaults, intimidation. Rise of politically motivated murders, like the teenager Kayler Ellingson killed in North Dakota by a man who said he thought he was a Republican extremist. Political violence became acceptable as long as it came from the right side. When the federal government loses moral authority, the states go their own way. This isn't theory anymore. It's become reality between 2021 and 2025. Some basic examples. Texas decided to build its own border wall after Biden halted federal construction. Florida refused to enforce CDC mask mandates or federal vaccine passports. Sanctuary cities like New York and Chicago openly refused to cooperate with federal immigration law, then cried foul when border states sent migrants to them. And lastly, Second Amendment sanctuary counties exploded nationwide. Counties where sheriffs openly said they would not enforce federal gun laws. Some states even started passing constitutional amendments stating that federal laws could be nullified within their borders if deemed unconstitutional. Does that kind of sound familiar? That's what South Carolina did in 1860, right before Fort Sumter. If you can't shoot your enemy, you can strangle them economically. The economy itself has become a battlefield. Every sabotage, shutting down pipelines like Keystone XL, draining strategic petroleum reserves, to dangerously low levels, or weaponizing inflation by printing trillions during COVID, causing the worst inflation spike in over 40 years. Or we have targeted shortages like diesel, fertilizer, baby formula, basic foods. This is hitting farmers, truckers, and the working class families the hardest. Oh, and don't forget ESG scores, corporate loyalty tests forcing businesses to obey progressive politics or lose access to financing. Meanwhile, in the ruling class, they insulated themselves. Wall Street profits soared, congressional stocks outperformed hedge funds, big tech and big pharma raked in billions. The American middle class bled dry. There's no more middle class. Control information and you control reality. By 2022, censorship wasn't just happening, it was an official policy. The Twitter files revealed the FBI, DHS, and CDC directly pressuring platforms to censor dissenting opinions. DHS Disinformation Governance Board, yes, a real federal agency, was launched, then quietly paused after a public backlash. News media has openly colluded to bury stories that might hurt the regime while amplifying lies that served it. Example, the Russia hoax, the Hunter Biden laptop, COVID lab leak theory. I mean, the list goes on. Independent media, podcasts, Substacks, Rumble channels, those have exploded in response. But so did deplatforming campaigns and debanking efforts against them. The information war was in full swing. By 2025, the map of America didn't just look different, it felt different. Red and blue weren't just colors anymore, they were separate nations occupying the same land. And somewhere, deep down, every American knew this can't hold much longer. So now we're reaching the point of no return. Civil wars don't start with cannon fire. They start with two sides realizing they can no longer live together under the same rules. In America today, the moment has already come and gone. By 2025, the separation is cultural, economic, and increasingly legal. Two versions of law, depending upon your politics, two media realities, depending upon who you trust, two economies, urban versus rural elites and suburban working class. You don't need a north versus south line to be drawn up on a map. The split runs through every town, every family, and every institution. A nation can survive bad leaders. It can't survive when nobody believes anything anymore. According to the Elderman's Trust Barometer in 2023, less than 20% of Americans trust the media. Under 30% trust the federal government. Massive majorities now say elections are rigged, courts are biased, and major corporations are corrupt. Without trust, every action, every law, every verdict, every election is seen as illegitimate by half of the country. That's not a democracy, that's a cold civil war. Economic freedom is personal freedom, and that freedom is dying. Here's some key facts for you. The wealth gap between elites and working class Americans is wider than during the Golden Age. Inflation and interest rates crushed small businesses and first-time home buyers. Federal Reserve policies bailed out mega banks while middle-class families are drowning in debt. Rural America and red states are openly defying ESG-driven economic models, and large companies are being sued for woke politics and counter-boycotted into bankruptcy like Bud Light, they did with Dylan Mulvaney, and Target or Disney with their woke agenda. The economy itself is becoming a form of political punishment. When states stop following Washington, the union is already broken. Recent flashpoints would be Texas deploying its own state guard to resist federal immigration demands, building its own border defenses. Florida has passed laws defying federal gun regulations and COVID mandates. They're also now bringing back child labor, too. Missouri passed a law nullifying federal gun control within its borders. In 2022, it was called the Second Amendment Preservation Act. States are now prepping to stand against the federal government, not alongside it. The legal paperwork for secession isn't there yet, but the mindset of secession absolutely is. Civil wars happen when the idea of living together becomes unthinkable. Polls from 2024 show over 40% of Americans believe it may be time to split the country. 51% of Republicans and 48% of Democrats said they'd support red states and blue states governing separately. Movements like Texit, which is Texas secession, and Cal-Exit, which is California secession, are gaining real political traction, not fringe movements anymore. The people are mentally already separating. It's only a matter of time before the real world events catch up. So we're not waiting for civil war to start. We're living inside one right now, without most people even noticing or even realizing it yet. And the final phase is coming sooner than anyone wants to admit. 2025 isn't just another election cycle. It's the year reality smashes fantasy. For most people, the slow breakdown has been happening so long they forgot what normal life felt like. So the first flashpoint was the death of trust in elections. Okay, Americans trusted elections enough that losing parties would grudgingly concede and move on. Even in 1960, which is JFK Nixon, and 2000 Bush Gore, the system survived close calls because people believed it still worked. Now, after 2020 and 2024, the country believes that every election is rigged. Ballot harvesting, mail-in voting chaos, censorship of political stories, federal agencies like DHS and FBI meddling in narrative control. It all shattered public trust. The impact is in 2025, no matter who wins, tens of millions will consider the president illegitimate. That's not politics anymore. That's pre-revolutionary conditions. Without trust in elections, you don't have a democracy. You have factions waiting it out for the right moment to take what they want by force. Flashpoint number 2, the collapse of economic reality. Before, you could work a decent job, like factory jobs, trades, clerk, and buy a house, start a family, retire with dignity. One income could support an entire household. Basic things like food, gas, rent, affordable for the average person. Now, a $500 emergency breaks most families. Housing prices tripled relative to wages. The U.S. economy became a casino rigged for the ultra-rich, while the middle class got hollowed out. The impact? Rural America and younger generations have nothing to lose. When people have no stakes in the system, they have no reason to protect it. The American dream didn't just die, it was murdered, and the killers are still getting bonuses. Flashpoint number 3, the rise of state versus federal armed conflict. Before, even though deep divisions, civil rights era, Vietnam, states ultimately respected the Supreme Court's ruling and cooperated with federal authority. Disagreements were fought out in courts, not with militias or defiance. Now, Texas is fortifying its own border against federal orders. Florida, Missouri, and South Dakota are passing laws nullifying federal gun control. Sheriffs and state guards are openly declaring they won't enforce federal policies they disagree with. The impact is states are building parallel power structures, their own militias, their own financial systems. The federal government is rapidly becoming just one player among many, not the supreme authority anymore. When the states start acting like independent countries, it's because they're getting ready to be. Flashpoint number 4, the forgotten cost of violence. Before, left and right hated each other politically, but violence was unthinkable for the average person. Riots were rare and shocking. Political assassinations, devastating events, not normal background noise like we see now. Because we now see political street violence has become casual, normalizing the Portland riots, the attacks on Supreme Court justices, or even state capitol invasions. Assassination plots and domestic terror threats are regular FBI bulletins. Cartel violence from Mexico is bleeding into border states. Militias and extremist groups are growing quietly. Both sides are armed and bitter. The impact is it only takes one flash event to spark escalating and cascading violence nationwide. 2025 could easily be that year. Civil wars don't start with formal declarations. They start when enough people think maybe it wouldn't be so bad. So this is where we are, rebels. We're not arriving, we're already here. A nation that doesn't trust its elections can't afford its own life, resents its neighbors, and arms itself against its rulers. It doesn't matter how good your constitution is, civilizations run on trust. And when trust is gone, the collapse is inevitable. If you've made it this far, you already understand. We're not waiting for a civil war, we're already inside of one. You can't feel it, you can't see it, and deep down, you already know the old America isn't coming back. But here's the thing, you have a choice. You can either get swept up by the chaos, or you can start preparing for what's coming next. That's why this video is just the beginning. This is the first of a 5-part series where I'm going to walk you through part 1, the soft civil war, which is this video. Part 2, how it all started, how the seeds of conflict were planted decades ago, the key moments, whether they be political, economic, or cultural, that pushed us past the point of no return, and why nobody in power ever planned to stop it. Part 3 is going to be what Civil War 2.0 will look like. Forget 1861, this will be nothing like the first Civil War. So we're going to talk about what real 21st century civil conflict will look like. Decentralized, chaotic, economic, digital, and regional. And we're also going to talk about why the collapse won't be uniform and where it might be the worst. We're going to work on part 4, how to survive the collapse. We're going to talk about how to make yourself collapse resistant. We're going to talk about building local alliances, securing resources, protecting your family, becoming anti-fragile. We're also going to work on mindset shifts you must make now, before the real breakdown accelerates. And then we're going to go to part 5, where we're going to talk about rebuilding after the fail. What comes after the dust settles. We're going to talk about how real communities will rebuild culture, economy, and governance from the ground up. We're also going to talk about why this could be America's darkest hour, but also its rebirth. So I'm not here to scare you. I'm here to wake you up. You can be a victim of history, or you can be one of the few who shape what comes next. If you're ready to see clearly, prepare wisely, and lead others, make sure you're subscribed. And I'll see you in part 2, Rebels.